Welcome to the MIM Podcast. I'm Adam Norman, founder and CEO at MIM, where we're on a mission to create the best major incident managers in the world. At MIM, our clients range from the largest, most well-known companies through to new, innovative companies across almost every industry from more than 72 different countries. You're going to hear about the best practices, strategies and tactics, how companies deliver major incident management excellence, some of the challenges they face, and different views on major incident management from around the world, as well as how major incident management is constantly evolving. On this podcast, we go deeper, interviewing professionals from the community. Our hope is that you will leave this podcast with some new ideas and a greater passion for major incident performance. In this episode, I sat down with Damon Edwards. Damon is the co-founder and chief product officer at Rundeck. Rundeck was recently acquired by PagerDuty, and Damon is now the senior director of product at PagerDuty. In this episode, we discuss PagerDuty and Rundeck, automation in major incident management, specifically automation for diagnostics and fix, as well as the wider industry and the future of major incident management. We hope you enjoy the show. Hi Damon, how are you doing?
Great. Adam, how are you doing?
Really good, thank you. Really good. So I mentioned just before we came on the show that Rundeck got acquired by PagerDuty and now part of the PagerDuty family, which is really, really exciting. And obviously on the show, you're going to explain why and why this audience, I think, will be particularly interested in that. But before we do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Damon Edwards. As Adam just said, I'm now on the product team at PagerDuty. I was a founder of Rundeck, and which we could talk about in a moment. But prior to that, I think also relevant to the audience, I was a managing partner of a DevOps consultancy, right? One that specifically focused on operations, right? I think we got to be very well known for taking what people saw on the conference stages. We were involved in the DevOps movement from the very beginning, and taking those ideas and translating them to what actually can work in an enterprise, right? Not changing the fundamentals or changing the ideas, but just saying, hey, how do you apply this to the scale and I guess really the sheer scale and the long memory that exists in enterprises. And that really kind of formed our opinion of the world, helping operations organizations transform and meet those challenges. And that led into Rundeck, and Rundeck is runbook automation. Really, how do you take the knowledge that is stuck in all these different silos in your organization that only a few subject matter experts have? How do you take that and turn that into self-service, right? Encapsulate that knowledge and hand it off to other people so they can execute the things that previously only your subject matter experts could do, right? So you can distribute the load, you can move control closer to problems, but do it in a safe way, right? Not just kind of willy-nilly, hey, here's an SSH key and some scripts and, some sudo privileges and say a prayer and, have a good time, right? But really controlled self-service that actually, stays out of people's way, but, lets organizations move control to where they needed it. And one of the big use cases for that is incident management, right? And that's how we got hooked up as partners with PagerDuty. And then Jen Tejada, our CEO, made a very compelling pitch to say, hey, look, when are you going to find two products that are, right in the same wheelhouse, but there's no overlap, totally complementary. Both customers love us. Customers want us together. Let's get together and build something great together. So it was a compelling pitch, and here we are.
Yeah, congratulations. I mean, it's a hell of an achievement, I think, for someone who's founded a company to get to a point that you have, and had that acquisition by a well-known company as well. So yeah, I mean, it must feel great.
It feels good. It's also kind of nice because, it feels good on two levels, right? It feels good, obviously, you said, whether there's a personal achievement, I can't lie, or a team achievement, but it's also, great because it really furthers our mission, right? Now that sounds a bit corny, but it's true that it's like, hey, the most satisfying part of Rundeck was people came up to and said, Rundeck changed my life, right? Or you're like, what? How does software do that? It's like, no, like I used to be buried in all these repetitive, requests, or I used to be woken up at 4:00 in the morning all the time. My wife hated me. And, I was always grumpy. I could never get anything done that I wanted to get done. Now, by setting up Rundeck jobs to do this stuff, I can handle a lot of that stuff off safely. And now my wife doesn't hate me as much. I get more interesting things done at work, so on and so forth. So it's a fun, that part was cool. And then now sort of putting that through the power and the scale and the resources of PagerDuty, it's neat because we can already, just see it impacting more people, more quickly. So, it's a fun ride, but it's by no means over yet.
No. So, it's interesting. So what's it actually felt like? I mean, to be in that position. So to have a company acquired at that particular scale. So for you, is it a big change now you're a part of PagerDuty? What's it like? Because I mean, many people watching this, particularly enterprise people, will never experience that. But we are in an age where actually for a lot of companies, that's kind of the holy grail, to build a really substantial company that's got mass recognition across the globe. And then to have that, I think some people will be really interested.
Well, it's interesting because I think, drawn on from our consulting background, right? We, spent a lot of time marinating inside enterprises, right? And you see the forces that makes things different, right? Then when you hear about these high flying unicorns, right? These, some people jokingly call them the world's largest small businesses, right? They took one service and scale it to infinity, right? And everybody's built around that, and you got purpose built tooling and everything. It's great. But then you go inside these big enterprises where we're running the world really happens. Where 99% of the revenue, really comes from our day-to-day lives are based on, and just the sheer scale and the diversity and of people and of things and of ideas. It's the history of success on display, right? They've gotten to that point because they've accumulated all of this success, right? And, at a certain point you become JP Morgan Chase, right? Which is, I don't know what their IT budget is nowadays. It's billions, right? But imagine it's all the layers of people and of technology and of ideas and the customers and their relationship to it. And just the sheer volume of things, right? Now, PagerDuty is a very, I think a well run, 800-900 person company, but you start to feel that hey, this is, remember that you can't know everybody, right? You can't just change on a dime. You have to, effectively manage through other people. You have to collaborate with other people, and that's when the friction starts to happen, and that's when the bottlenecks or the resource constraints or the mismatched priorities. So it's interesting to you just have to understand those are natural occurring forces, right? And I think it's really interesting to go from a world where, we do run everything and it's all right in front of us, and you can pick the phone and talk to anybody, or not the phone, right? You can hop on Zoom or Slack and talk to everybody in the company and keep them all in your head, right? Versus where, hey, now we have to work as this distributed, organization. So it's kind of fun to see, the systemic forces that we're always building our software, and our approaches for. It's fun to see that inside our own company now, right? That, and they are just these naturally occurring forces that everybody shows up to work trying to make their company better, right? But just when you put a whole bunch of human beings together, this is just how things tend to flow, right? So I'd say that's been the most, kind of one of the most interesting sort of things I didn't expect is like, oh yeah, now, not only are we talking to people about these forces, but, we're also in an organization who's, building itself to counteract those forces on a day-to-day basis.
It's really interesting because I often joke, particularly with my other half. She teases me. that I mean, I've started a number of companies. I had a small exit from a sports nutrition business many years ago, but I've done a number of things. And I also worked the corporate world earlier in my career. And I joke the majority of my time now has been spent building companies and creating products and services. And I've never once taken outside funding. And I joke that actually I'm far more effective with large numbers of people and resource at my disposal or collaborating with them. So like when I worked for large corporates, I could make a lot happen very quickly. But yeah, you're right. Obviously, you need a lot more governance in those size of companies. So it's always quite funny that I absolutely love what we do, and there's incredible benefits to it, and we're at a point now where we have pretty significant resource ourselves, but it's still not a patch on, as you say, companies when you're talking they've got 1,000 people, they've got 5,000 people, and the resources to make very, very interesting things happen, particularly with such a large number of great brains at your disposal, is really something quite spectacular. So yeah, I can imagine it's going to be great fun. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I mean, it's you learn about what makes an enterprise, right? I think when you're coming from a small scale organization, it's the change, right? The ability to change. And you come from a small scale organization, things are built for today. What am I doing today, and kind of how can I make fast changes for today? And it could all be gone tomorrow, right? Which is sort of the high wire act. But it really kind of two things in my career really made me realize what an enterprise really is. And it was first of all we're working for let's call them the Fortune 1. It was a very, 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 very large company, and their CIO at the time made this funny comment. They're like, "Hey, we need to be really sure. We're talking then about value stream mapping and really looking the end-to-end picture and understanding kind of what's going on between these whole dev and ops. Really the whole life cycle, right?" And she said, we got to be really careful because when we start executing, we execute. Right. And when you get 5,000, 10,000 people executing, they're going to execute. Right. And it's a hard train to stop. And I'm like, oh, I kind of thought she's giving a humble brag, like, oh, we're so great, And then, this was kind of earlier on in my career. And then, it was a guy named Jay Bloom who he's in the office of the CTO, I think, at Red Hat. They're in a big transformation team. He made a good point that, the point of an enterprise is the difference between an enterprise and a small company. It's not the scale. You think it's the scale when you're in the small company. But then you realize when you get to these big enterprises, thousands of people, just distributed, across the globe, multiple business lines, bought by acquisition or organic, or whatever, the enterprises, right? The point is not the scale. The point is the longevity, right? That everything is kind of organized for longevity, like for it's going to live forever, right? It's going to outlive us all, right? That's kind of the point of these companies. And so when you realize that whether that happens by design or by just natural, that's what happens. And so you're in those companies trying to make change happen. Everything is pointing towards longevity, right? So things live forever. Things will, the antibodies will come and attack whatever changes you try to put into your organization. That's I think also the big shift, right? That these, even though they may, people think, oh, enterprises, it's all about quarterly earnings, blah blah blah, but the reality is most of the big ones, right? They're going to outlive us, right? So, the organization becomes a very different animal. And again, not for bad reasons, but for well-intentioned reasons, it becomes a very different animal than what it's like to be in the startup world. And I think PagerDuty is like right at that cusp, right? It's 800 so people. It's becoming a great company. And it's interesting when you're able to harness that and you get all those great people working that direction. That's something that I'm very, very excited about. Very excited about and very excited to be a part of.
I'm conscious there'll be some people who aren't familiar with Runbooks at all. So for someone who's not come across those, could you explain, particularly in the context of like major incident management, what that would look like and how we'd use that?
Sure. I mean, I think we'll start with the historic version of Runbooks, right? And back in the days when all we had was physical knocks and, telephones that you had to switch over the paging, which pager you're gonna whose pager you're gonna page when you call out the right number. You had these binders, right? and these binders were the Runbooks, and the Runbooks said, hey, look for this, right? And if you see that, then do these things, right? And it generally was page all these people, right? That's kind of what it generally happened to be. And, that was the Runbook, right? And then, you had those people that would, their on-call folks, they would often have a Runbook as well, right? That says, hey, here is how you restart this service, right? It's like, okay, what do I got to do, right? You open up the right page and there you are. And then those kind of move to, wiki pages or, web pages or, SharePoint or whatever it might be. And, it was a way to write down knowledge and try to hand it off to somebody else, right? That was the classic Runbook. And, our take on Runbook is more of and also the Runbook automation that happened back then was early Runbook automation. The advantage was, well, that person who is going to do that restart, the expert who knows how to do it already, it's going to follow this kind of mission control checklist. Let's automate some of those steps for that person, right? So it stayed the same person. It's just, hey, that person, instead of open up the binder and taking, 30 minutes to go through all these steps, it's now going to take them maybe 15 minutes to open up the binder and look, and okay, I'm going to run this script, run that script, run that script. So that was sort of the original idea. And, kind of where the direction we've taken it is more towards what's really important in these organizations is self-service, right? So, what happens is, if you think about, let's use an example of an incident. What generally happens is we've got all kinds of monitoring now, right? And we've got alert management. And, like if you look at what PagerDuty, classically has done, it's great at looking at all the alerts. It's great at figuring out, that there's all these events. This is an actual, problem. How do you page the right person and give them that information, right? So it speeds that mobilization up, right? But then what do? Well, now you're still back at the same thing, which is, okay, either you're reading through that wiki and trying to figure out, what did this person say? What do they actually mean? When did they write this? Do I trust this person, right? Or you're looking at a pile of shared scripts somewhere, like, hey, in this directory, I know there's these scripts or there's these tools. Am I using the right version? Is it -I or -E? Wait a minute, is this, but do I know even where to run it, right? So there's all these questions there. Or what most likely happens is you're just going to escalate, right? And so you get these escalation chains, you get these kind of mass, sort of shotgun, war room style where, there's that joke of it's a mean time to innocence, right? How quickly can you call into the war room and prove it's not your problem, right? And so you can get off. So the idea of Runbook automation now is, how do you encapsulate the knowledge? What would those experts do to go and see if there's a problem in that system? Well, rather than paging all of them, how about we actually give you a button, first responder, to be able to call the things? What would the database folks check? What would the app folks check? What would the platform engineering team check? So on and so forth, to see if this is healthy, performant, whatever it might be. And then, so now it's transferring that knowledge to those people, right? And then it's like, well, let's put the action in their hands to actually do something about it. So let's say, hey, maybe there's a certain set of things like restarts or clearing a cache or something that, some other things that might, clear some known problems or some, kind of suspect things you can do. And let's put that into their hands, right? And safely let them execute those. So let's get away from that big escalation chain and push control closer to the problem. And you do that through these automated runbooks, which are effectively, they're not replacing your underlying automation. That's still there, right? So all the knowledge and skills that your team have acquired over the decades of, all their shell scripts, PowerShell scripts, Puppet, Chef, Ansible, you name it, right? That's fine. Don't need to change that. But what we need to place is, you need to capture, how do the experts actually how do they actually execute that, right? How do they invoke all of that? And you think about something very simple like a restart, right? Oh yeah, hey, is the restart automated, Adam? You're like, sure, it's automated. Okay, well then can you tell Jane over here, let her do it? And you're gonna be like, well, okay, well, first of all, Jane's got to know how to log into the monitoring, quiet the monitoring. Then she's got to know how to go into F5, and she's got to be able to pull those nodes out of the resource pool or the load balancer pool. And then she knows, like, okay, I got to go and check these couple things to make sure the traffic is off those things. And then I got to run my script. But before I run the script, I got to edit it, and I got to change these environment variables. And then I got to know which nodes I'm going to execute this this script on. And then I got to know what the right command line arguments are to pass to that script. And then here's the 5 or 6 things that I just know, you just know, right? To go and check to see whether or not the service has come back up properly. In your judgment, it looks good. Then you got to put it back in the load balancer pool, put it back, in the monitoring. And that's going to take either, 6 months of actual development work to automate all that, or I got to, put Jane through a crash course, for the next few weeks to teach her how to expertly manage all those things. Instead, with the Runbook, we're saying, hey, you just basically can build through configuration, right? All of that workflow that needs to happen. And that includes the guardrails like the access control and the error handling and the, guiding them to smart user inputs, constraining values and defaults and that sort of thing. So the idea there is that I'm capturing that expert knowledge of how to invoke either this diagnostic or remediation procedure. And I'm now giving that to, I can capture that safely and hand that off to somebody who may not be steeped in all of that knowledge of all those different things. And much like an aircraft pilot has that startup checklist, it's great, even when those people are experts, to follow these procedures, because then I can spot anomalies. Hey, we know we're doing it the same way every time. We can spot where the anomalies are, where these problems are. And then the next step of it, where this is all going, is why don't I have my PagerDuties, my tools that are gonna spot these problems, have them try these things first, right? So before somebody even has a chance to log in, I could run all those diagnostics. So when they arrive, they've got that information. Or it goes one step further and say, hey, maybe in the next 5 seconds or next 1 minute, right, 3 minutes, whatever it is, run the diagnostics, try some type of remediation kind of action. And then either don't page somebody, just give them a report later that says, hey, these things happened, or still page them. But when they're arriving to look at the problem, they're seeing, okay, it was, first of all, we're back online, so that's good. And now I can look at, these are the diagnostics that were run. This is the action that we took. This is what happened, right? So you're either using these things to kind of build up the human beings, like Iron Man suit, right? Like, the movie The Iron Man, like, you're putting the robotics around them to make them stronger, faster, better, smarter, right? And have a better response, right? Or you're actually building little robots that actually can go and try things to help you to keep those problems off of people, right? Or try to save the day, try to get us back online before customers really notice, and then we can, go through our normal procedures to figure out what's going on. So we've taken an old idea of Runbooks, right? And we've kind of gone into the new, digital DevOps, SRE, cloud native world with them. But, we're building them for everybody, right? And we've built them for, the enterprise.
Yeah, so really helpful, thank you. I think it would be interesting just to labour on something you said there, because I think there's a lot baked into it, particularly for someone who's new to the topic. I think we've talked when we first spoke, obviously not on the show, some time ago. The way you laid it out for me in terms of major incident, this audience, I think was really quite spectacular. What we're working towards and the vision we have, and it was really interesting because you talked about obviously with PagerDuty, a certain amount of automation in terms of engaging and mobilizing your engineers as well. But having this, using Rundeck and having Runbooks set up for diagnostics and health checks, essentially at the push of a button, without the need for some of your more senior engineers necessarily being involved immediately, or even whilst they are in the process, let's say, of being woken up and engaging, they can potentially land on a war room, on a bridge call, and you've got a lot more information and areas for them to start looking at. And I just think that's a really incredible thing and very powerful thing you're talking about when we're talking about major incidents, because we're talking about things that cost thousands, if not millions of pounds, depending on the scenario, of downtime to people, whether it's direct costs, whether it's reputational damage, whether it's breaching legalities that they're obligated to, whatever it may be. I think the use case for that just becomes absolutely incredible. And I know, obviously, we're very privileged. We work with many organisations all over the world. That's just not something that exists at the moment in any way, shape or form, or not that is being used at the level it should be anyway. And I think it's really quite special, what you've been talking about.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's interesting because this is one of these sort of funny things that we just sort of stumbled on along the way, right? Which and a lot of our prospects or people that are coming to us for the first time, either the open source product or the commercial product, we go through this, automation, we're thinking about doing things, right? It's like we're active people. Like, where's my screwdriver and my hammer? I'm going to go get this done, right? So automation is going to get things done. And then you kind of hit this realization that, wow, actually, one of the most powerful things here is not even doing anything, just being able to take all of that investigatory knowledge that we've learned over the years. Like, there's somebody in your organization right now from like the network team that just knows on the command line, can just rattle off like 20 different, system level diagnostics and tell you exactly what's going on the network that's hitting that device, right? But like, they'll try to tell it to you and you're just like, okay, I think I remember sort of some of this, right? Or they'll learn something new, their knowledge will be outdated, right? And so a lot of times it's disseminating that knowledge. It's disseminating that ability. It's the ability to say, hey, how am I going to diagnose this thing? Or how am I going to tell if this application is healthy? And when you talk about the high velocity of these organizations today and how fast releases are coming, how fast things are changing, you can't keep up, right? So the people that are building those things are best to know if that thing is healthy. So have them give you, the first layer of, here's how you tell if this service is actually, look for this log, look for these entries, is answering on this port, and check all these system resource levels to see if something's wrong. And everybody knows stuff like that. So how do you put that together and then hand it off to somebody else? And that doesn't sit well in a monitoring tool. It's not really, you could use it. It is sort of a kind of monitoring, but it's not. It's more of a health check, status query type activity. And that doesn't live anywhere today. It lives in people's heads, and I got to go now page them or yell over the cue ball or, try to pass documents back and forth to tell you how to do that versus saying, hey, let's just take that, whatever you're doing, whether it's scripts or system commands or API calls, whatever it is, and just let's drop this into these Rundeck jobs. And then I can now hand that off to you, right? And, I can spread that ability to tell whether or not things are healthy or not. And, you get these stories of like, it's the frustration of like, oh yeah, it happens all the time. I roll out of bed at 3 a.m, right? There's some problem on something. The first responder person, I get on the bridge call with them and I'm like, hey, what's going wrong? Oh, X is broken. Okay. Got the page. Yeah. Have you tried Y? I did. What happened? It didn't work. Okay. Why didn't it work? I don't remember. Right? What did it say? I don't remember. Right? Okay. So now we go back. And so it's just, you're not accumulating knowledge during these incidents. But if you're able to capture that, that ability to take these expert diagnostic actions and have them tied to the incident record, you're now seeing the history of all that stuff. It's all in there. So new responders can figure out what's going on. But more importantly, my first responders can figure out, most of the time can get a pretty good triangulation on where the problem lies by being able to execute all of those. So we're dramatically compressing the front half of the incident timeline by automating that and putting all those at people's fingertips, whether it's running automatically, right, based on what the monitoring saw, or it's people showing up and going into their diagnostic folder and trying these different things, talking about it, chatting about it in the incident timeline. It's just, there's so much that can be saved in the first part of that of the incident timeline before you even get to worrying about how do we automate the actual response, the actual go fix it part, because that part's the easy part.
It's interesting because you've got your expert who obviously might perform a certain task at a certain speed. Even if they do disseminate that knowledge effectively, there's no guarantee that the people or the peers who now have that knowledge perform the task as quickly as they do, particularly if they're not at the level that individual is. So what may take, I don't know, John 5 minutes, may take Sue 15, 20, because got to keep looking back at the material. So it's really interesting that you're enabling, particularly for initial diagnostics and checks, you're enabling that initial part to happen much quicker. So in the global best practice, one of the things we teach is with slick, robust organizations, everyone knows their role during a major incident, everything's in place. Initial comms should be issued within 15 minutes. That's more than achievable. And that's the benchmark, that's the standard. And the things that normally get in the way are lack of tooling. So not having something like PagerDuty to automate some of the engagement and trying to mobilize the operation, scrambling around for phone numbers or trying to escalate if people aren't responding. But there's a really important bit there as well that I think, by the nature of major incidents, they are more complex. It's very rare that you have all the information that you need to go on. And I think what you see a lot of major incident managers or whoever's performing that role find is they desperately want to give at least a reasonable amount of information for those initial comms. The problem is, if you don't get a great start, and the diagnostics are going to take longer to do, you almost have very little to go on. And it's a real frustration for stakeholders to receive that as well. So for me, this really fills that gap as well, and that need for, at least if you don't fully understand the complex issue, you do have baseline diagnostics that you can perform very, very quickly. So I think I can really see this becoming a substantial game changer for a lot of operations.
Well, something I'd add to that too is, you're right. When there's the, when the holes of the Swiss cheese of the universe align perfectly in that magic, Luke's, I'm mixing metaphors here, when Luke's photon, whatever it was that hit the, the Death Star that, flies in the hole, like those incidents just happen, right? And, a lot of times it's just putting those elemental diagnostics or elemental actions at people's hands. It's not as easy as like, oh, diagnostic, resolve, right? Maybe it's like, hey, we're trying these different things. And so we're putting more robust tools in people's hands. But, I think where the big time savings comes in that does matter just as much is all the P2s and P3s, right? We talked to a CIO the other day who was like, tearing her hair out because she's like, I log into an occasional P2 or P3 call and there's 30 people on the call, right? Going around and around. It's like, what kind of drag that is on the organization if you follow all that disruption? Because it's not just how fast can you solve the incident for the customer. Yeah, that is the number one priority. But our organizations are living organisms, right? It's build and run, right? And so, there's all this project work, all these other things that could be going on. And if somebody's got to log into this incident, right? We're talking, first it's 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is to get them actually, on the call, and then they do whatever they got to do, and then they're sitting around, and then maybe they, can drop off, but they're still in the context wagon, right? They're still following along but they were told to drop off, and now they've got to get a cup of coffee and check their email, and maybe it's lunchtime, and so they've lost the whole half a day, right, of stuff they could be doing. Now you take that and you put that across those 300 people that were in and out of these kind of P2 problems. It's a huge drag on the organization. That drag ends up impacting customers. It's not as acute, right, as the sort of that major incident, but it's still there. So the way we see it as, you need to address all of your incidents kind of following the same patterns, right? Something we learned kind of in the sort of agile, the DevOps world is the bimodal life is difficult. You can't be operating, people operate in different modes. You got to say, hey, this is how we solve incidents, and having these automated runbooks saying, hey, this is how we diagnose things. This is the tool we use to communicate and collaborate. This is how we tried our different, resolution actions. Well, the super complicated, we never would have seen that coming, major incident. We may only be able to automate, the basic diagnostics and some of these elemental actions we'll try, but we still have to do a lot of different, ad hoc things versus the other pile, the other mountain of incidents that we have to deal with that we can automate, that we kind of know what's going to cause them. We know, how to deal with them. We can automate the detection and the resolution of those so that we can spend more of our time either building the new stuff we want to build or getting ready for those major incidents and building up our robustness and our defenses against those things. So I kind of want to be, clear that I'm not trying to sell a magic button that's going to solve, the global outage that nobody saw. Because I love it. If you ever met Charity Majors, she runs Honeycomb, the observability company, but she has a long history of Facebook and other places. And, she has this great way of putting it that, that working with complex systems, complex distributed systems, you have an endless supply of almost seemingly impossible failure scenarios. right? Stuff you never would have thought, like no way that would ever happen, right? You'd bet your life savings that would never happen. Well, something that it's going to happen, right? Just some weird carom shot off, whatever, through the Swiss cheese right into the, the belly of the beast. And next thing I mean, they talk about things like, at some of these big global providers that, some ISP in Croatia, configures something incorrectly just to sort of save on some traffic or not having to upgrade their devices, puts off some weird messages that, causes some other router somewhere in the universe to explode, which affects a database, which then backs up and, makes it so members can't log in around the globe. Like just weird stuff that would never happen. It never happened the first time. You can't believe it ever happened. It's never going to happen again. So that's life. That's going to happen. We want to give people the tools to go and fight those things, right? But at the same time, those same tools you use to fight the big beast are things that you can easily, slay the little beasts with a lot quicker. And that adds up to a tremendous amount of time, a tremendous amount of effort that we can keep off of our key people.
I think it's really interesting. Yeah, you obviously make a very good point. Obviously, particularly in large organizations, everything counts. Everything is workload. Everything is work for our people. But I don't think you can understate how valuable, and I appreciate it's not going to fix everything for people, particularly complex major incidents, but how valuable companies will find the ability to get a reasonable understanding and possibly a path to at least start investigations on for major incidents. One of the things we come across a lot is that's often a bit that takes the most time for people. It's just trying to figure out what's actually working, what isn't. Okay, right, where should we be focusing some of our attention? And then we begin investigations. And you're talking often a good half an hour for companies, and that's if they've got things together, particularly for a call that's got maybe 10 to 30 SMEs on it. That's pretty significant, even just being able to get baseline diagnostics.
Especially when the 31st person is the one that has that piece of knowledge.
Yeah, indeed.
Right. That's the real problem. Is it's not the fact you brought 30 people on the call. It's that the 31st person is the one that actually knows. It's actually going to go, wait a minute. Like I've seen this before, and here's what it is. And I mean, the way kind of we describe it is, I don't know. Maybe a lot of folks in the operations world are only vaguely familiar with the whole continuous delivery idea. Right. It's part of this whole agile continuum. And the idea is you check in code, and it just goes through this gauntlet of automated testing, so it can eventually get to production. Right. And the power of it is you're building a system that is that gauntlet, right? It's like that building the layers of checks, automated checks into the system. And that gives you the confidence to be able to shoot your code all the way through to production. So, in that same mindset, the point of these automated diagnostic jobs you're talking about is you build those layers, right? You build those layers of checks. So if you said you got that one person that knows how to rattle off all those system commands to check the network. Well, you got some, you got people on the platform side or the cloud team. Somebody just knows, hey, wait a minute, if on AWS, if you didn't pre-warm the services like this, you get this error. They just might know some esoteric thing. Hey, can you put that in a script or just give me the commands you would do that, right? Now it costs nothing for you. It's just, it's a few bits on a disk, but you've now captured that knowledge and your company is a little more protected, right? And so just like in that continuous delivery world, you can build those layers of tests that will let you kind of compose this defense, this gauntlet, right? And so now when something happens, in theory, right? That's not really true. I can fire off the entirety of the knowledge of my company about how to detect what's going on with this thing. I'm never going to get there, right? But that is the dream. That's the vision I'm going towards. And so, you kind of just like developers get in this idea of you write code and then you write a test to prove your code. You want operations to think about, I'm writing these tests. I see a problem, I write a test. I see a problem, I write a test. I see a problem, I write a test. And then all of that builds up to where the fact that now when something goes wrong, I can just take anybody in my organization, right? Have them hit something's wrong with this in this quadrant, right? Of my universe. And it'll fire off all of those tests, right? I think that's the vision that we saw users, Rundeck users going towards, right? Because, it's Rundeck is foundation is an open source project. People use it for all sorts of things, but it was that idea that, hey, we're going to build this layer of of tests for our organization. And then I'm going to take the ability to run these expert actions to fix things and put those in people's hands. And that's when we get I said before, the Rundeck saved my life, right? It wasn't Rundeck saving their life. It was the place in their organization where they could make that behavior happen, or they could build those tests, they could build those reactive things. We just happened to be the conduit for it. I'm not going to say we did it, right? They did it. They're the heroes. We just, kind of saw them doing that and built the tools that make it, a little bit easier to do that.
But I think that's where the best stuff comes from, isn't it? Is when the community engages and almost defines themselves how they want it to work and how they need it to work, because you get the most viable solutions that way, because they understand their own organizations, what will and won't work, and the barriers and what people will and won't accept. So I think it's really quite special when you get that level of engagement from the community. And that's actually not dissimilar. We're obviously very different solutions we provide, but the training that we provide, that's how it often evolves for us. A lot of it is through client feedback, observation, and we're just in a really privileged position that we get to see inside of some incredible companies all over the world. So you even pick things up culturally, and you kind of think, well, how can I reshape that so that it works for everyone? Because there's some real value here, and I'm trying to figure this out, and you play around with it, and the community then kind of enhances that. And so there's something really special about companies that do tap into the community and the community helping build.
It's a weird thing. I mean, we learned this from our, DevOps consulting business that we had, that all we really had to do was just be kind of a semi-informed pair of ears, right? And this is a very funny thing I see companies doing, is they need to be the heroes. They need to be the ones that are going to tell people like this great new, idea or whatever. They need to invent it, right? And I see this in some analyst firms. I see this in consulting firms. I see some product firms. And the reality is the path to success is just to listen to people, just be a conduit to take, hey, what's going on in your world, help them focus on what's really going on, help clear the noise away for them, and then help them pattern match, right? Help them saying, hey, look, if you're trying to achieve this outcome, here's the ways we've seen this happen in these other areas. So let's distill that pattern out, and then let's try this pattern and see what's gonna happen, right? And if you become that conduit, it becomes this virtuous loop. And it almost becomes, kind of easy, right? I don't want to belittle it, but it's a much healthier relationship, I think, with your audience. If you focus on being that conduit instead of saying, I'm smarter than you and I'm going to come up with some new great idea, those rarely ever succeed. And in a lot of these organizations, a lot of times it's just connecting people, right? It's just that, especially in operations traditionally, I think it's been so functionally siloed, right? I mean, I think the dev side of the house, because they get to move on to a new project each time, they can reconfigure how they work and how they're built. But you look at operations, it's functional silos, right? And those functional silos become very isolating. Everybody's doing the best they can from their, they're coming to work trying to save the company from their perspective inside their foxhole, their team. And they're being bombarded with all these random requests from the outside that they aren't kind of a part of the bigger picture. And it's that siloed way of working that makes it very difficult. So often it's really just connecting those silos, and not to bring it back to Rundeck, but that's a lot of what that pattern is. If you saw people doing with Rundeck, is they use it to connect silos. Like Adam knows how to do something that my team, he's just the next floor over, right? He's really technical, just like me, but there's something I got to do that I need him to do some little piece of it each time, but only he knows how his way around the database, the firewall, the system, whatever it is. So I got to go bug Adam every time, right? And I'm trying to jump into his silo. There's a mismatch of tools and processes and priorities. And so instead, it's like, hey, to make the communication better between our silos, you create a self-service interface for me. I create a self-service interface or interfaces for you. And that helps the work move quicker and smoother to those places where I can't do it all myself. I do need something from the outside. Instead of sitting in a ticket queue, right, and all the problems that come with working through queues, let's turn as much of those things we can into these self-service interfaces. And now that's how I move, right? Then I can move quicker. And that's, that is the general pattern. And we've been talking about how that applies to, to incidents, right? But that same pattern applies to just the other 95% of your work, right? It's the day-to-day service requests, things you get pulled into. It's the same idea, is that you want that self-service because now I've got fast turnaround time, which means I get fast feedback. So I don't have to wait and get disconnected. and you're not constantly interrupted. So you can focus on the things that you have to do. And the whole process is very well and under control. And you take all those little relationships around the organization and you fix those with that self-service. Suddenly it's like lubrication. This things start moving a lot faster because we've taken all of that toil and, disconnection and waiting, out of the interruption out of our lives.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really quite impressive. And it's interesting what you were saying about clients, because I think there's a point where I think it matters. You were saying about the community and how essentially you've created an incredible company and how it creates so much value. I think that often is the key, isn't it? I think there's a point though that becomes self-fulfilling. I don't think it always is. I think you get to a certain size of client base and they are geographically dispersed enough that you've got a really good sample of the globe. So like you've got enough clients in so many countries, and they're of enough of a range of sizes. So perhaps some modern startups, VC-backed, fairly significant, perhaps a number of enterprise. And that's when you start getting the benefit of perhaps that scale of going, oh, I'm seeing the same problems here. I'm hearing the same things if you're really listening. And that's absolutely, for us, that's pretty much now we're at a point, we've innovated some of our own stuff initially, but we just absolutely listen for what are their real pain points and how do we make their lives better for it. And for us, I think that's probably been the biggest secret to such a quick growth, particularly in the last couple of years. It's just how do we help? But yeah, I think that listening, and it's really exciting because as I say, when I was sat there listening to you intently when we met number of months ago now, I was hearing it and I was just like, you're actually answering one of the main problems I hear so much from organizations. If you would speak to them, they would not articulate it that way and you wouldn't necessarily connect the two. And that's why I was saying to you, I think it's so valuable. And it's almost, I think it would almost be a bit beyond belief for a lot of big enterprises at the moment because they just haven't seen that. And there is so much work that goes into tasks that could be automated. So I think this is going to be really exciting for a lot of people. Can I ask you, I appreciate you're going to have quite a range, but on average, what sort of reduction in time to resolve do you see on the incident side for people? I appreciate it's going to be an average estimate.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about known problems, right? So, like one of my, one of my favorite ones. This guy came up to us. Actually, he was at a conference, and he was just kind of walking around. He's kind of a gruff guy, and asked him, and he goes, "Oh, wait a minute, Rundeck." He goes, he starts smiling, big ear to ear. He goes, "I remember you guys." And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, we work for some insurance company, and the first Rundeck job they had, it was open source usage, was they had these." It was this poorly constructed as a complex underwriting app. So like 5 different people had to log in this web app and underwrite, like this big complex, like mega real estate type insurance, right? For, big developers. And if one of those people walked away from the computer, shut their laptop, got a cup of coffee, browser timed out, whatever it might be, there was a database, in the database, there was a record level lock on that policy. And you could not get back in. So you're locked out, right? Everybody is locked out. And so what you had to do is they called the help desk, and invariably it was when, big real estate developer was on their way to their office to talk about their portfolio and the broker somewhere in the globe couldn't get in. They're screaming. They had to, so the help desk would page, and basically it ended up paging one of their 5 DBAs in the whole company who would literally have to get out, 5 people for a global operation to basically run this little PowerShell script that unlocked that record, right? And it was just, this has happened 20 to 30 times a month, right? And the argument went all the way up to the CIO, right? Of, hey, we've got to fix this problem, right? And in the code, and the head of engineering said, no, we're going to replace this system in the next 2 years, which is never going to happen, right? So therefore, no budget, no time. You have a fix. It's this P1 DBA bug, right? So what they did was the first thing they brought Rundeck in for was they just had this Rundeck job that anybody in the support team with their Active Directory login could log into Rundeck, and they said put in the policy ID number in the input, hit this button. It's going to run this little PowerShell status thing to check that record to make sure it's locked. If it is, it calls a little PowerShell script to unlock it. Oh, I forgot. It opens a remedy ticket before and after, right? So a ticket gets opened, this thing gets unlocked, and anybody in the calls in the the help desk could run it, right? Now 20 to 30 P1 DBA bugs, fire drills a month disappeared, right? People are like, right? So it's one of these weird ones where it's so simple, right? It's just an easy thing. But it took all of that rigmarole and disruption and took it away, right? So just looking at the timer reduction doesn't always sell the picture. But if you think about it, for ones that are known problems like that, where all I got to do is do a quick check, do a quick, this cache gets stuck, run this command to clear the cache, be done. Or there's this, the firewall, rule change made a problem, so do this, open this, DMZ port up or whatever it is, right? Or, rollback or failback or whatever, failover, whatever it might be. So that you're talking, it's 80, 90%, right? I mean, it's literally just how long does it take for either the system to sense it and run it automatically, or for the human being to say, run the diagnostics, they all run, and then I'm going to try this resolution. So, that one's pretty obvious, 80, 90%, for known issues. For unknown issues, it ranges, right? You see somewhere, people talk about on average, like 20, 30%, reduction just from kind of across the board of the unknown issues from having those, pre-built diagnostics, and that can range, so they say per incident type, it's anywhere from like 20 to like 50, 60%, right? Just because, certain things like certain classes of problems, we just know that, hey, there's these kind of random memory issues that happen, right? So we got to do these rolling restarts. And so that's maybe 60 to 70%, faster than it used to be. It's pretty simple and straightforward, but other things are a little weirder. So just having the diagnostics, that'll help us as well. So, that's sort of the range, but I think the most exciting one that it can point to consistently is the reduction in escalations. And this one when it first happened, it was actually working back with a U.S. entertainment company like about 5 or 6 years ago now, back in the early days, where they were the first ones to kind of really bring about this idea that it's about reducing the escalations. And they're like, the escalations are what's so expensive is because we're injecting all of this chaos into the organization because we're taking our should be operators, they're NOC folks or the virtual NOC folks at this point, and they're powerless to actually do anything, right? They just read the tea leaves and kind of know which part of the organization to blast in escalation to. And it's such disruption to the rest of the organization. So, we see it consistently. It's like 50%, is what we've heard from a bunch of companies, that they're cutting their escalations in half, right? And it's hard to always kind of know sort of what, but if you look sort of over time period, any given time period, what the difference is, I'm pretty confident in the 50% number of, cutting escalations in half. And if you think about what power that has in an organization, to save costs and to, stop burnout and all the other bad things that come from all that interruption and disruption injected into the organization.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty incredible if you can, cut that in half.
You're turning those NOC people back into operators, and they love it, right? Because they're like, whoa, like, because companies, in the early days of companies, like the people that on call fix things, right? And then as you get bigger and bigger scale, the human problems or disconnections and silos we're talking about, the on-call people don't fix anything, right? It's like they've lost the power to actually log in and do anything. They're just routers, right? They're the escalators, right? That's all they are. And so now take that bit and put them back in control. Like give them investigatory powers, give them some basic remediation powers. And then all this knowledge ideas starts getting accumulated with them, right? And that's where the people closest to the problem are the best ones they get the most information on how to fix it, and they often have the best ideas for the next time because they see it over and over again. Hey, I think we try it this way. Here's how I think we could fix it. If you gave me the ability to do this, I think I could head these things off and save us before we have to escalate to somebody else to come in and give us a more permanent workaround.
Yeah, that's really impressive. And yeah, I can imagine you can imagine these highly intelligent people, as you say, who perhaps end up as escalation vehicles, really missing out getting to use some of the skill set and actually be a bit more involved. So no, I can see the appeal. So in terms of, you obviously see a lot of enterprises What sort of tool stacks do you see used in conjunction with Rundeck? Obviously, PagerDuty.
Yeah. So PagerDuty is a lot. Well, I mean, there's kind of three sort of imagine like a triangle, right? And it's everything on these triangles. And one of them is the sort of human management side, right? It's the ticket systems. I put the incident management tools kind of in that as well. The classic sort of on-call part of PagerDuty, or Victor Ops, ServiceNow, Ops Genie, so on and so forth, Remedy, right? So there, it's the how do you organize the people, mobilize the people, communicate amongst the people, and that's also kind of bled into the other side of the triangle, which is the monitoring, right? It's all the signals coming in, the metrics and the events, and you see kind of a conjunction of those tools, the human management tools and the monitoring tools, and a lot of that was kind of cool about PagerDuty was their event intelligence and the ability to put all that smarts from the monitoring into the mobilizing of the people, and you really get some virtuous feedback loops there. And then the third sort of part of the triangle is the automation, right? And the automation is the most varied. It's you see everything, right? I mean, it's like we've gone through a couple decades of one tool is going to rule them all, right? It's going to be Opsware and Blade Logic and CF Engine, and then it was going to be, no, those are terrible. It's going to be, Puppet. Oh, wait, it's Chef, right? Oh, no, it's Ansible, right? Or actually, oh, wait a minute, now it's all cloud native and you have a bunch of APIs. I don't need that stuff. It's Kubernetes is going to get rid of all of it, right? So what do you have? You got everything, right? So, and of course, just a mountain, an ocean full of, shell scripts, PowerShell scripts, all that kind of stuff, right? Perl, Python, Bash. So, those are kind of the three pieces, right? And so I'd say, from most enterprises, I think where you see the most consolidation happening is around the ticket tools. I think that's becoming highly commoditized. You do see, the classics, Remedy sort of being the top of the heap there. You see the new entrants or I guess now they're sort of the legacy as well. The ServiceNow, right? I'd see a lot of that for a very classic sort of ticket-driven operations. And then you see sort of the rise of Jira, right? That's very fascinating how you see where in organizations, it's like they're Jira and ServiceNow shops. And there's sort of this contention between, which ones, when they're talking externally, they're trying to argue each other, which one's better. And they're talking internally, they're arguing which one they hate more, right? I mean, it's like, it's the love and hate of these, this ticket. And I don't fault the ticket systems. I think it's that ticket driven siloed sort of way of working, right? That everything's got to go through a ticket queue, and that just causes working through a ticket queue causes the problems, not the tools, themselves, right? And then the monitoring side, it's just the plethora of, that one is probably next to automation is the most varied, right? It's they've got the official option, whatever that might be, and then they've got the other 7 monitoring tools that they're using at the same time that some people are even unaware of, right? So. And I don't think that's going to change. I think it's the aggregation tools, right? It's the ability to aggregate the alerts, aggregate the metrics from all these different tools, and then have the intelligence to look at all the signals and know what's going on. So I think just like in the automation side, I think it was a mistake to try to force everybody into one tool, because you need people to use the tools. It's a very lean idea. Let people locally make decisions on what tools that they need to get their job done, and focus on the integration of those tools, not on trying to force everybody, sea change to use one thing or the other. I think on the monitoring side, we're seeing that same thing happening. We're realizing, wait a minute, let's not try to fight it and say, this is the monitoring standard for this organization, you must do it. Make the monitoring aggregation, the AI ops, style, that's a very loaded term, but make the thing that the brain that can look across all those signals. And it's actually then, in that case, the varied is a good thing. That let people use the thing they think is best to get the right information out of those systems, put it to the central tool that we can then use to rationalize all of that and decide if something's wrong. So I think I'm seeing less pressure in organizations to standardize and more focus on normalizing the data, right?
Really interesting. Really interesting. Thank you. So I guess that segues really nicely, actually, into... I'd be interested to hear where you think the industry's headed, because I mean the speed at change in the industry we're seeing now and working practices is faster than ever. And it's been really interesting. Obviously, you have a particularly interesting background even prior to this with the DevOps consultancy that you mentioned you owned, particularly for enterprise. So I think it terrifies a lot of legacy institutions that have a lot of old systems that are very interconnected. And it's just so complex that it's pretty terrifying, the idea of rapid code deployment. And I think that's trying to get to that space, I think, is still elite. Where do you think the industry is headed?
Well, I think it's undeniable that I think, it all starts with the digital transformation idea, and that's taken root in the boardroom, right? And then I think that's where we're going, right? And, it took me a while to figure out what all these folks were talking about. Like you said, you got to see enough companies. And excuse me, it sort of came down to the idea that digital transformation is this idea that everything needs to be connected, right? So in the past, it was like I call into the call center and it's like, say the telco, the cable company, it's like, oh, they've got the billing system, they've got the sort of maybe customer account management system, they've got their green screen that tells them the status of their the device in the neighborhood, they've got their little help desk, they've got all these different tools, and the integration is the gray matter integration sitting in that chair, right? Sort of there's like a business process, there's a human business process that integrates these systems. And on the website, I get some brochureware, and maybe I can fill in a couple things, but in general, I got to call somebody to do something, right? To this new world, which is everything's got to be integrated, meaning it's all got to happen through one window, which is a problem because all these different systems that I could run in kind of semi-isolation are now all deeply interconnected. So that's a problem. It's got to be mobile and all that stuff, which I think is kind of a red herring, but it's not that different than. It's just a new interface, right? But it's got to be always on and always there. So it means I got to give customers direct access. So now, from an ops point of view, it's hyper interconnection, always on, everywhere, all the time, right? So I think, and changing fast, right? That can respond to what the customers want. So if you translate that down, I think that's one part of this DevOps idea, which is, hey, how can I get change faster in front of the company to learn faster as an organization? And it's one part of this new interconnected, always on, right? Where I can't divide and conquer with my resources anymore. I can't just kind of carve things off and say, okay, you want to go fast over here, or go fast over there, because it's all interconnected. So that pattern is undeniable, and that pattern is what the board level wants. So I think we have to lean back or lean in and get used to it. So I think that's there. So we have to learn how are we gonna deal with this, right? And maybe I'm a bit biased, but the thing I always want to focus on is, well, what stops us, right? And what stops us is the work needs to flow horizontally across all these different silos, right? So what are we going to do about that? Well, there's this kind of coming out of the DevOps world, there's sort of the you build it, you run it idea, which is, hey, how do we not make one person do everything, but how do we put inside product aligned teams all of the things that we need so they can work horizontally without having to have dependencies on all these outside pieces? And then it's like, well, then there's stuff outside that you just can't put one of everything, right? Inside of these teams, you're going to have to, and then you have interdependency between teams. And that's where I think you need to focus. And, that's where I think the self-service, comes in, right? The aspect of we have to replace those ticket queues that normally would be between those silos, right? We have to replace those with these self-service interfaces so those teams can continue to work. So imagine like the work doesn't have to go sit somewhere else for somebody else to do. The work that people on that team have all of the pieces and parts and capabilities to get that work done. Now, what they're pulling, and I see this a lot of enterprises, that's kind of some of the more the higher performing operations organizations, they're splitting their ops teams kind of in two now. That there's a platform engineering team that is very much like a product team, and they're building these platforms. And then the rest of the operations organization is more of the SRE model. They're more of the operators, right? And they're being distributed into these different product teams, right? So you've got this team building the platforms, and then the rest of the folks are operators who are helping those other, development teams become you build it, you run it sort of organizations. And, there's a great event, the DevOps Enterprise Summit, that I think it's probably it'd be a great compliment to folks who goes to your to your event. And it's, big enterprises talking about how they're trying to solve these problems. And a lot of them are moving towards that model in some shape or fashion, that operations is kind of splitting. And it's, one part's being more platform product oriented, one part's being more distributed. And you see that that's sort of the end goal. The end goal is, how can we move the work so that it flows better, and that we're not having these where it's this kind of horizontal dev, high velocity team, and then this very functionally siloed ticket driven operations teams, and then saying that, work has to somehow flow horizontally across those teams. Of course, it's not going to go well, right? So how do you kind of make these pipelines work better? It's building better platforms, right? And then it's pushing a lot of the operators to where they're close, where they're working in the same, the same foxhole with their development counterparts, and getting those virtuous circles. So work doesn't have to leave doesn't have to go to other silos, right? I guess I would call it. So that's sort of where, that's sort of the speed version of kind of how we're seeing things develop in the world. And of course, everyone's going to be, somewhere along that continuum. And a lot of it depends on, kind of how much legacy success, does your organization have to pull along in that process. And, but for most folks, I think it's just, how do you make tomorrow a little bit better than today? Right. And I think that's the mindset. And I think that's one of the best things that came from, I think, the sort of agile, lean DevOps ideas it's about empowering individuals to fix the work around them, to make the work flow through the organization better. And, if you can build that, get that going, there is no right or wrong, right? I get very frustrated when people are like, you're doing it wrong. It's like, no, they're not. Like, this company's been around for 20, 30 years. They have a $5 billion IT budget. Like they're, so much of global commerce runs through them. They're definitely not doing it wrong, right? They're doing the best they can for what they have. And there's a path to getting better, and there's ideas they can pull into how they're getting better. But, unless you're empowering those people to make things a little better each day, unless they're not doing that, if they're doing that, then, they're doing it right. If they're not, so I get a little aside there. I get frustrated when people launch in with the "you're doing it wrong" bit.
Well, I think that's like a hangover from how we used to think about frameworks, and I think how a lot of people who were dealing with enterprise IT had to think about it. I think it was there was a period where it was unnecessarily complex and unordered, I think, and frameworks like ITIL did a really good job at giving people a lot of clarity about, okay, these are the elements that need to exist. This is how it needs to perform. I think somewhere along the way we got very lost in. ITIL itself would say it's a framework. You don't prescriptively put this in place and then hold everyone to. And that's where, as professionals, we see a lot of people obviously going wrong. Your organisation, its needs and the business needs have to be the number one priority. Like, we're there to serve and enable. And that has to be of mind. And I think it's always a danger with any kind of framework or any new movement, is there will be certain people who just miss the point of that and miss how dynamic the world actually is, and perhaps because they've not had slightly broader experience, they find it very difficult to imagine something outside of that very prescriptive framework being there. I mean, early in my career, I found ITIL really, really valuable, particularly at the start of my career, because it gave me a really good map to understand areas that I had no exposure to at that point. And so when I started encountering them, it was really quite useful for me to go, okay, I see what's going on here, and that makes perfect sense. And particularly in again, organizations with thousands and thousands of staff and elements that were quite siloed, it really, really helped. And so I think they're really, really valuable. But as with absolutely everything, any tool, any framework, if you get too rigid in your approach to what is the real world, it just starts to cause more problems than it does solve.
Well, it's a very, ITIL, it's an interesting thing, because I think I know where it went wrong, so to speak. And I don't think it was out of bad. I think it was good intentions. I think, like you said, at a point in time, it was very sorely needed, because it's a common vocabulary, right? And a common sort of mental model that people can describe the things they're talking about. It's very important to have a conversation. We're talking about the same thing, right? And I think the content sort of inside each part of the framework is good content. And I think you go to ITIL 4, it's good content. It's funny, it's gone DevOps, right? It's like it's like a DevOps Agile course, but it's like inside that. But I think and then if I got spent the last few years kind of getting to know some of the the luminaries of the ITIL movement and a lot of the content folks, whatever, and their big complaint was people are doing it wrong. Right? Like a little blaming the customer, but it's okay. They're saying like, hey, people, there's nothing wrong with ITIL. We never said that, right? It's you people are putting together wrong. And, I said, I think the part of ITIL, I think that the poison part of it is the framework, right? And what I mean by that is because what it does, it says, okay, you got to divide your world up. So in creating a kind of a taxonomy, right? Which is a good thing, right? It's just like, Taylorism and scientific management for you lean wonks. It's like the old sort of, I'm going to take a stopwatch and measure how people, so there's only one right way to do things, right? That mindset of business got us out of the apprentice world, but it's not going to didn't get us into the modern world, right? Just like having that framework and taxonomy got us out of the dark ages of bespoke IT into kind of this more industrialized, view of the world, which is good. But the problem is because in making a taxonomy, we divided, was it like 16 or I can't remember the number. What's the number of processes in the ITIL world, right? We're dividing these things up: problem management, incident management, blah, 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 blah. Everything's in this change, everything's a little process. Well, what happens when you take a little process, right? And you bring it in, you take a big framework, a bunch of little processes, and you bring it inside the corporate world, right? What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to say, Adam, this is your process box here. Jane, this is your process box here, right? Susan, this is your process box. Raj, this is your process box. What's going to happen? You, being the best employee you possibly can be, you're going to manage the crap out of that process. You're going to be the best darn problem management shop in all the land. And what happens is it reinforces the silos, right? It reinforces that kind of breaking apart behavior. And then you start to get sharp elbows of, this is my process. How dare you, tell me that, I have to assume it to something else, or I should, make it part of a bigger picture. And so, what ends up happening is the delivery mechanism, which is that process-oriented framework, pulls people away from seeing things horizontally. It encourages people to build more because you need, for your career, you're going to make this the best process ever. So you're going to build your processes. You're going to do it your way. You're going to have your protections, your team. That's the thing you're going to care about first. Your metrics you're going to hit. And so it's when that framework, right, delivery mechanism hits an enterprise culture, it pulls things apart and injects the exact bad behavior, right, that it's telling you not to give. Nobody hears that part because they're just getting their snippet and they're kind of going. And a lot of the consultants who I think are driving, the ITIL, always driven the ITIL train, it's a good business, they don't see it that way because they just see it as, I'm just coming in and teaching a framework. They're not living with the what the side effects are. It's like this magic vaccine, right? That it's, you don't see it, but it's the side effects 2 years later that everything, I guess it's maybe too soon to talk about that, but it's the side effects of the delivery mechanism, right? Not the thing that it actually did. So I feel like, and DevOps by its nature is very much a deconstructive. It's a deconstructive idea. It's to say, hey, look, this process is bloated and broken and slow, right? So what are we going to do? We're going to just rip it all out, and then we're going to put back just a little bit each time to see what do we need. Because we're trying to achieve, we're trying to get throughput and quality and agility, right? So let's take out whatever the process there before. Let's rip it all down, and let's just put back enough process each time to try to achieve that throughput, velocity, quality, and agility, all the abilities, right? And so when that just deconstructive, I keep wanting to say destructive, which is funny here, ironic. It's a ironic slip, right? But when you deconstruct those processes, I'm going to Adam and I'm saying, I'm deconstructing your processes. And you're like, the hell you are, right? I'm certified. This is how we're going to do it. I've thought long and hard about this box, and dang it, I know how to do this, right? And you're like, yeah, but you don't understand that, just saying, that disrupts the overall, it's a local optimization, disrupting the overall flow of the organization. We're trying to deconstruct this and rebuild things so that stuff flows better. It's in direct contention with the classic framework. So I feel like the content of ITIL is correct. It's always been, it's timely now, especially in V4. And the terminology is great and the intentions are all there. I just think the delivery mechanism, the process-oriented delivery mechanism, is fundamentally broken and needs to be ripped out. But when you rip that out, you're now ripping out the entire purpose of the framework in the first place, right? So it's sort of this existential crisis around, you can't rip out the framework concept, because then it's no longer a framework, right? It's no longer a body. It's just this, now it'd be just a bunch of DevOps books, right? And so it's like, this is the, it's an interesting time, and I think everyone's heart's in the right place. And I think people get a little too aggressive and dismissive about the other side. DevOps books, it's a bunch of cowboys, or ITIL, you're a bunch of dinosaurs that are stuck in cement. It's like,
yeah, I mean, there's got to be decent. I mean, decent discourse is how we're all going to win. Like, people are having civilized discussions about these things and trying to leave perhaps some of the emotion to one side. And I think it is really interesting that you say it, because that's been certainly my experience. You talk to people, particularly people who deliver training and consultancy in something like ITIL, and they get it. They completely get it. Yeah, it's a framework with certain elements that absolutely is going to be really valuable to people.
Their view is spot on, right? It's the yeah.
It's what happens when it goes into a large organization, which by the nature of, or at least my experience of large organizations, is the C-suite spend a huge proportion of their time trying to make sure it's not this big bureaucratic beast that just ends up with too much politics and people not actually getting stuff done. And I think that's just the nature of anything that is that large and has tiers of management that is needed, is going to have a bit of a problem trying to stay away from that by its very nature. So then you introduce these things which give you a really good model and concept for operating in something that is very complex and large, and you add that to a big organization that's going to be fighting complexity anyway, and it's almost inevitable that would happen. I mean, I'm certainly not suggesting.
How could it go any other way? Right. I mean, this is what I always said, like, when you take, just my scenario, if you take this framework, you say there's all these pieces, and you're going to put those things into any successful, modern business, how could it go any other way? It's going to turn into siloed, individually optimized, conflicting, problems. You say, hey, this is our change management process. They're going to just ride that process and exert absolute control, because that's all they can do, right? You're not making them part of the bigger picture, and you're just giving them this slice. And then what are they going to do? They're going to manage the best change management. They're going to change management that company to success, right? And that's when you get these siloed, broken, adversarial, sort of misunderstood. How could it go any other way? And I think that's why time after time you get this conflict where you have a lot of the forces behind ITIL, the people that really put a lot of good work into this, going, you're all doing it wrong, right? Well, that's because it happens this way over and over again. Why all these different companies who don't know each other all make these same mistakes, right? They weaponize it, they siloize things. It becomes a, things are gotten a little better because we've actually focused on process. And then, we get stuck in the concrete, or it gets worse, or whatever it is. Why does it happen time and time again across? Why is that the common complaint, right? And it's, I think, if there's any kind of fault to put on that side, it's like, hey, you got to realize that it's not, and I think that's kind of where the pushback comes from, because when the culprit starts pointing towards this whole framework concept, and how the delivery mechanism, but that delivery mechanism is the business model. It is the way that it is the way you apply this thing. It touches this rail that I think, people don't want to go towards, right? So my fear is, no matter how much you put of the new sort of lean, agile DevOps thinking into ITIL 4, right? Then you've still got that framework problem, and it's still going to be implemented that way in enterprises. And I think we're going to be singing the same, this problem's not going to go away, right? Which is unfortunate.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that I was really conscious of when we founded our own, essentially, framework training certification in major incident management was how do, when we involve all of the stakeholders who are recipients to major incidents and have their own agendas, their own view of the world, what they need, what they want from it, how do we do it in a way that actually creates more collaboration and buy-in and less rigidity around what has to be done or should be done? And how do we even include the anecdotal stuff that kind of allows for the various personalities and characteristics you're going to have in there? Because that, people can discount that, but it's a real world challenge. You have to understand that there are people in these roles, and people behave. We're all slightly chaotic and challenging when you put us in big organizations in our own ways. Some people have too much ego. Some people take the professionalism 2 levels, as you say, too far, and the intent's right. They're trying to do it with the best intent, really trying to deliver the best they can, but just don't see the bigger picture. One of the things we came up with was the MIM stakeholder experience, which is a way of looking end to end at essentially your major incident process as a whole and all the steps that occur within it, and the touch points are very similar and not dissimilar to marketers would understand this. So you build your stakeholder personas. So these are all the actors essentially who touch upon this, and even the ones who don't play any role but might be the recipient of information or an output of it. And then how do you map out the entire journey of those major incidents and spot all the touch points for all these different people and their recipients? And then how do you involve them in a process where both the operational teams, all the stakeholders, whether that's C-suite, whether it's IT leadership, whether it's end users, whether it's service delivery, whoever it may be, how do you involve them in this very visual process that gives them a voice to come together and go, okay, what's going well, what isn't going well, how do we continually improve this without being bound by we must do this one thing, and everyone gets a voice at the table? And it's been really quite humbling to see how that's worked, because for me that was one of the biggest ways that we stayed away from just being a framework and training of you must do this, and allow people in the community to essentially make it their own with the right input.
And then they can use whatever pieces of the framework or whatever point in time they're at to solve problems.
But it captures the change as well. So it captures that in 6 months you've done all this work, all the same people are looking at it, and the journey is going to look very different, and you can now have a conversation about where else that needs to go, which could be completely different from where it did originally.
There's a quote, my lean research is failing me. It was either Taichi Ono from Toyota or Edward Deming, the kind of godfather of lean, said that if I was given an hour to solve a problem, I'm going to spend 59 minutes on the problem and 1 minute on the solution, right? And I think that's because once you really understand the problem, it's straightforward to fix it, right? And I think you're talking about making it visual, get everybody in the same mental model as to what that end-to-end, what it looks like today, how work actually moves through our organization, not how we think it should be or it might be, but how it actually moves through the organization with real firsthand knowledge of the other people in the room who do it. And then be able to look at that. And once that's the hardest part, get everyone on the same visual picture. Once they are, the good intentions and the natural horsepower of their brains will solve the problem, right? And I think that's what happens is a lot of, if you lead with, oh, ITIL's the way, you're like, oh no, it's you should do it safe with the DevOps, sort of twist or whatever it might be. It's the same problem where it's like if you get everybody to focus on the problem, you can apply pieces, right? You hear a lot, like in the DevOps world, there's a lot of angst about SAFe, right? It's the scaled agile framework, right? And they're like, it's just waterfall, right? It's just a waterfall picture with DevOps terms on it, right? And or agile terms in it, right? And it's like, okay, I can see that argument, right? But for certain organizations that are heavily entrenched in these ways and have the fear of compliance and security, we're never gonna be able to do this, and it's dangerous and it's radical, and you're all insane, right? Well, SAFe gives them a picture that says, oh, I can snap this in, and I see all of my roles sort of mapped into it, and it has some big things that feel safe to me, and yet I'm starting to. It's like chemotherapy for the for the dying organization, or it's it's a jackhammer for the cement, or whatever metaphor you want to use. It's what at that point. But if you took SAFe and you tried to put it onto sort of a lean, purebred, built from the ground up agile organization, it's probably going to maybe slow things down, right? I mean, that's probably, they're not going to like me saying that no more than the ITIL people are going to be mad at me for my previous comments. But that's because at that point, but I know organizations, there's some luminaries of the DevOps. One I'm thinking of in particular, a guy named Scott Prue from CSGI, the largest billing companies in the world. He's spoken openly about how they've used SAFe, how to take a very traditional, huge, conglomerate of these kind of, outsourced billing, and they work for all the telco companies. It's a huge business, right? And, how do you take that and move that into a modern, rapid, agile DevOps, way of doing things? And he's got the receipts. He's got the proof of how they've applied these techniques and how the velocities changed and the qualities changed and the people love working there more. It's a great story. And so the point is, at that time, for where his company was, they focused all their time on understanding the problem, and then SAFe just happened to work for what they're doing. Just like you look at a lot of companies, if you focus on the problem and then you're applying the ITIL sort of, some of the best practices and really the terminology and these ideas, and you're applying them consciously, jointly as an organization, you're going to see a lot of organizations who do well with that, right? So it's that, 59 minutes of understanding the problem and then 1 minute of applying, the right thing the right thing to fix it. I think you're absolutely right. That's those successful organizations focus on the learning and understanding the problem together. And the ones that have a hard time with their transformation are the ones that try to lead with let's have a small team, pick the best solution, and then just lay it down, across the organization by edict. And then, their transformation, it's a lot of conflict, a lot of pain, and they often end up don't going anywhere. And then they all can see this is no good. We're not good at this, bad, blah, blah, blah. And then everybody runs back to the safety of the old broken ways. And the executives pull their hair out because, they're like, we need to fix things. We need to move. We need to change. And we can't get it done. And, they're at their wits' end.
I don't think any of the ITIL guys are going to be mad at you. I think you were pretty fair. I think it's how people are implementing it in large enterprises that's the core problem. It's certainly not the,
which I'd argue is the framework. So it's like, not the content in the box, but the idea of the framework of this is the universe, these are the processes, you're going to, work on these processes. It's that it reinforces the siloed behavior that cause a lot of the problems in the first place.
Yeah, I think I can see that. I think there's a legacy of behavior of implementation that's kind of stuck with it. So even now, obviously there's terminology changes into practices, etc. And I think that was quite telling that they understood where people were perhaps going wrong in some of the legacy. And I thought that was interesting, small shifts, but quite symbolic as to, okay, yeah, we get where some people are going wrong here.
Well, one of the things I was hoping they would just kill the ITIL name. Just say, hey, look, that was ITIL. Now we're doing something else. And it's the same content. It's the same people you trust and know. That was then, this is now. Here's how we're here's this body of knowledge that we're imparting. But we're making a wholesale departure from this old, kind of more fragmented way of doing things. Now, I don't know if that actually would have ever worked, or maybe just would have imploded the whole universe. But I feel like they're trying to say, hey, I think everyone's doing their best to say, as you said, acknowledging the ways that things have gone wrong inside the implementation today, and adding all this new content, right? And saying, no, this is a kind of a fresh start, a different way to do things. But when people say, oh, it's the next version, it's like, oh, it's just I'm ticking the box. I'm incrementing from 3 to 4. It's just like, a little refresh on top of it versus saying, no, fundamentally we got to upgrade, we got to update the content because of all the learning that's gone on in the last 10 years. And then we also need to adapt this framework delivery mechanism because, that pure intention reacts with the reality of enterprise, global enterprise culture. It's just, two safe chemicals or, compounds, and you put it together, it's like baking soda, whenever it explodes, right? When on their own, they're inert, right? But you can you put them together, and obviously bad things, happen a lot, right? So, maybe we need to change that part too.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because it's I mean, Axelos, so UK government, in partnership with Capita now. Obviously, originally it was the Office of Government Commerce. UK government essentially championed a lot of it and the initial frameworks. But and their model of they license it out to training companies, and so I think there's a whole commercial element there that doesn't necessarily aligned to what you would want to see, and that's a really difficult. I'm not criticising that, because that must be a really difficult position to be in. Because you look at ITIL, and there is, I mean, we'll try not to have too big a discussion about it, but there's a brand in there that has recognition, that has significant value. So if you're a commercial entity, you've got a whole set of training providers who recognise that, and there is power within that, and there is commerce within that. There's a whole. I can see that you'd be in a real struggle or you'd be loath, but then that's the challenge, isn't it? When we're in a system that's based on capitalism, in order to be able to keep doing any kind of good work and impacting change, you do need resources and money to do that. So the problem is you've got that cycle of, okay, like you say, we could do that and go afresh, but would that then impact the ability to generate revenues, which impacts the ability to have further positive impact? So there's almost a bit of a dichotomy there, I guess. But anyway, I'm getting probably a bit. This is my love for companies, and yeah.
No, I know, but this is actually this is very important, right? Because this is why I've always argued in my DevOps travels, like there's a sort of this anti-vendor slant, right? Where it's like, vendors, consultants, blah, right? Well, yeah, for small companies, you don't need that, right? Or kind of purpose-built companies. Yeah, you might need vendors in terms of like bodies, like, oh, I need so many of this kind of engineer, but you don't need sort of outside expertise and knowledge to come in, because it's all sort of, you call an all hands meeting, right? I say, like, I laugh, like you have a 200 person, smaller company, you don't have DevOps problems. Just bring people all together in the same room and say, this is where we're going, right? And that's kind of how it goes, right? Maybe do that 2 or 3 times and, they'll figure it out. Whereas you're talking about a, multi-thousand person, multi-geographic, multi-business line, generational organization, it doesn't happen that way. So, right. So you need this to affect change, to actually improve people's lives, to make tomorrow better than it is, their work lives, at least tomorrow better than it is today. You need these tools. You need these, you need people to be able to come in and who can disseminate knowledge, who can get people on the same page. And that takes a consulting industry. And, so you're right. So that's a good thing. And so you need that to affect change. And it's an essential tool in large organizations. But then at the same time, it makes you sort of pick a point in time and bet your business on something. And then as the world if the world changes too rapidly, then, you get stuck, which is, do you go to where the new, what worked before does not work today? Do you go to, can I shift fully to how it needs to be today? But in doing that, do I then have the problem of where I can't, my business can't go there, right? So yeah, it's an interesting challenge. And I kind of feel like, this is something that I think if you look at what the core, what the folks who really, base their life and business on ITIL, what they want, and what the folks who are, come screaming in with the DevOps ideas, they're so similar, and the passion and what the outcomes they want are just right there. They're just not like aligned, right? And it hits. And I feel like, if we can just get them on the same page, right? And in the high performing organizations, the ones that spend 59 minutes on the problem and 1 minute on the solution, they do become aligned, right? And then it's just like, oh yeah, of course. Like we do this, we do that. We got all these DevOps ideas. We're a DevOps organization, yet we do all this ITIL, we use all this ITIL terminology. We use this framework over here. It's like, and they just get confused at people and they go, no, you're this. And they're like, no, not really. And then their side goes, no, you're this. And they're like, no, not really either. Right. And they they look at you in a funny way and they're like, no, we just look at what we do today. And then we figure out what the problem is. And then we figure out which things we can borrow and pull from to make tomorrow better than today. And we move on. Right. And so I hope we can, celebrate more of those stories and push more of those stories to the forefront and get everybody aligned.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think I'm really with you, and I think the pace of the world now, I think it has been for quite a long time. I've actually, when you're talking about ITIL specifically, I really want to see like the continued evolution of it. I think there's real value there. I completely agree. I think there's certain things need to change. The one, yeah, oh yeah, I mean it's incredible. The one thing that confuses me is I wonder if the business model for it doesn't align with the goal of use. Meaning, if you're licensing as Axelos, if you're licensing this out to training providers, it's almost counterproductive to creating more iterations more often, meaning keeping pace with industry change. And so I'd almost, instead of these big updates, you'd almost be really excited to see lots of small updates that keep more pace and are more dynamic. But when
that's how organizations learn, right?
Yeah, exactly. But when you've got a business model almost that would, you suddenly, all of your customers who are training companies have to retrain their people in that material. There's all the material that they use to market and sell those has to be changed. It's almost like the business model doesn't necessarily fit for the end use and purpose of it now. And that's my humble, anyway, when I look at it, I think that's almost the disconnect, as opposed to, because I think suddenly if it weren't structured that way, you would immediately be incentivized. I almost think actually that people are going to be annoyed at this, but I almost think if you did away with perhaps not consultancy, but the direct training providers of it, and Axelos had their own training arm, it means the incentive is to deliver the very best material that is right for end use, and you cut out the middle bit of commerce that is perhaps wants the same and just be able to sell without too much change. Which is what most training organisations kind of sit within, whereas you immediately then link Axelos to wanting the best for the end users and being directly tied to a revenue of that. I think that gets really exciting because suddenly you open up all these other avenues and the business model is very different. But anyway.
Well, I'm going to segue, bring it full circle here, right? Which is that. I don't know much about. It's out of my realm. The business models of all these different folks. I want them all to be successful, and I don't know what the right answer is there. But that idea of moving, the idea of adapting. It's the learning cycle, right? And I think this learning cycle is how to as quickly as possible take the learnings from the edges and bring them back full circle to disseminate it through the whole organization. That's that virtuous learning cycle that you see folks getting involved with, and that's why you need to push the operational control towards the edges, right? Because it's saying those are the people with their the people that are in the firefight, right? They're the ones that have the best sense, the best learning, the best opportunity to understand what's going on. And now the trick is, how do you take that and pull that information back into the rest of the organization so we get smarter as an organization, right? And I think that's been sort of the lean idea, going back to Toyota Production System, lean manufacturing, is how do you distribute control, not to make just everybody do whatever they want, but to make the learning happen faster. To say, hey, we're going to standardize things, but then we're going to push control to the edges so those people on the edges can experiment against the baseline and learn and make things better. And that learning feeds back into the organization, and we go from there. And I think we're seeing that just happen so much faster than what it did, 10, 20 years ago. And I think, that's that those learning loops need to happen inside our organizations. And I think as vendors, we all need to align around helping that loops happen faster as an industry. And that means, software vendors, analysts, consulting firms, training organizations, we all need to kind of realize the speed at which the world's moving, and how can we jump in and we're all successful and we can help people learn faster, right? And make those learning loops, kind of this virtuous self-reinforcing, thing. So, that kind of is, that's what gets us up in the morning to try to help to figure out. And we happen to do it through software, you do it through the training and the consulting, I think we can all help each other out and help help the industry out.
Yeah, I guess for us, it just comes down to remembering, like, we're all here to serve. and it's how do we create the most value for people, and really support them through that, and then ultimately everyone wins. And I think for me, when I look at the industry, I always come back to that. I think about all the relationships. I'm like, well, are you creating value for these people? Brilliant. Like, you'll win. That's as simple as it is, and they will win, and in turn, everyone gets to benefit from that. And I think companies, and I'm not suggesting ITIL or Axos has, but companies that almost lose sight of that in their own complexity are the ones that run into challenges. It's like, who are you serving? What value are you creating? It's yeah, pretty much. So, I guess final question. I've had you on for quite a while now. So I asked you first where the industry headed before we kind of went off on a bit of a tangent. But so in kind of the next 3 years, where do you see Rundeck headed? Obviously a really exciting time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're just getting started on this, I call it ticket time to real time, right? That, hey, that are we able to operate as a collection of human beings, as a company? Are we able to operate not in this siloed, disconnected, request queue? It's ticket queue, right? I call that ticket time, right? And all of the problems that have plagued us over the years, and it's become this rate limiting thing, right? That our ability to operate, how fast we can operate as an organization, no matter who's doing the operating, right? You see that today; it's being distributed across the organization. No matter who's actually doing the operational task, the speed at which they can act, surely, confidently, and effectively and safely, is becoming the rate limiting step in the whole, IT supply chain, which is becoming now the rate limiting step in the entire business, right? So I think, this huge pressure on operations is only building. And I think we're very early in this understanding of this kind of move from ticket time towards real time, right? So, that's something that I think, we're just going to see I think an exponentially increasing rate of change across companies as they now take that transformation gaze off of just the, dev to ops delivery side of things, and focus on how day 2 and beyond is just as important to the overall end-to-end picture, overall health of and agility and speed and effectiveness of an organization. Better, faster, safer, cheaper, right? So I think we're early days in that transformation. So that I'm really excited about. It's one of the kind of big alignments that we had with PagerDuty, and why Alex and I and the rest of the team decided to join up. So I see a lot of that. I think also we're early days in terms of the effect of the kind of microservices and cloud native transformations, right? And what that means. And it's kind of a virtuous loop that we have these more ephemeral infrastructure and dynamic infrastructure, and how that is going to exponentially increase the speed and the agility that we're going to be gaining there, and how that's going to drive the pressure on operations to learn how to adapt to that, to take advantage of that. So I think that's going to become even more of a competitive advantage for companies who can harness that. But I think we're definitely early on in those. And that microservices, cloud native transformations causes a lot of problems, right? A lot of challenges to be solved, I should say, right? In terms of complexity and speed and, scale that we have to solve. So I think you're going to see those two things, kind of the operations adapting to meet those digital DevOps, kind of transformation pressures. And then we have these new technologies that are going to make the possibility even bigger. That's going to say, let's go faster, let's go bigger, let's go better, which is going to put more pressure on operations, which is going to unlock the next set of technologies. So there's this loop that's going to happen. And I think you're going to see a pretty hard split between the companies that are able to harness that and learn. It's like in the manufacturing world, they went through this, in the 80s. The companies that were stuck in the old ways really suffered. And so a lot of them kind of, to the big detriment, all because of their manufacturing capabilities versus those who figured out the, better, faster, cheaper, safer, lean manufacturing principles. And guess what? 50 years later, it's still going on, right? 40 years later, we're still going through these lean transformations in the manufacturing world. So I think we're still going to be, we're not different, right? We're still going to be seeing this. And, it's like that old saying that if you move halfway to the wall each time, you're never going to hit the wall, right? So if the wall is perfection and we can get ourselves halfway there each time, we're just going to keep getting better, better, better. And it's an infinite sort of, infinite loop of improvement. So those are the two big trends I think that are going to be acting on all of us and are going to kind of be dictating kind of what goes on with our work lives.
Great. Thank you. One final question. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think I probably should have?
No, I think this is a fun conversation. I feel like we just had a beer, even though it's 9 o'clock in the morning here, but I feel like we just had a good pub conversation, right? We just kind of, meandered through all the topics that you and I have an interest in. So no, I think, this was a great interview and, you hit all the marks and, I'd love to do it again sometime.
Yeah, no, I'd really like that. I mean, if I wasn't conscious of your time, I probably would keep talking to you for about another 5 hours. But no, really interesting. Thank you ever so much for your time. In terms of where people can go and find more about Rundeck, is that PagerDuty site now? Do you still have a separate website? Where should they go?
Yeah, so Rundeck we're a separate kind of brand, or we're a product, in a product portfolio. So you can go to rundeck.com and that'll take you to the Rundeck resources. You can also go to pagerduty.com. You'll see it from there as well. And sort of the vision is, if you want to be a PagerDuty customer, or you can be a PagerDuty customer, you want to be a Rundeck customer, you can be a Rundeck customer, or you can use both in this great kind of virtuous, integration, which you're going to see a whole lot more, I think, cool integration stuff coming down the pipe. So, it's whatever place you need to start in your journey. We're there to help. And I'm on Twitter at Damon Edwards. If you want to follow me there.
That was my next question, because there'll be people at different stages of the journey. How are they best to engage? Because I think particularly for this audience, the whole piece that we were talking about, perhaps selfishly, for major incidents, where they are looking at automating some of the diagnostics, and particularly those of our audience who perhaps already use PagerDuty, where would be the best place for them to start? Would it be through a YouTube channel? Would it be contacting one of the team? What would be the best place for them?
Yeah, if you're interested in, if you go to rundeck.com/PagerDuty, and if you're a PagerDuty user, that kind of gives you some demo videos and content there. But you can hit the contact button anywhere. You can even email me directly. I'll set it up for you. I'm Damon at PagerDuty.com, DAMON at PagerDuty.com, or send me a message on Twitter if that's your thing, and I can route you to the right folks. And that's something our team has been, we've only been part of PagerDuty since October, but something we're getting kind of better and better at is, being more consultative and saying, let's help you figure out where you are in your journey. And often it's not even the incident response stuff. It's like, hey, we're moving along, we're doing well there. The PagerDuty stuff is great, or whatever you're doing, but we need to now focus on more of the service requests, right? So we can get more of that off our plate. So we can then free up time to focus on these other, to focus on improving these other capabilities to improve our incident response, right? So, we're realizing that underneath the covers, it's the same people doing all of the work across the full operations lifecycle. And sometimes it's all interrupt driven, and that's what you're really worried about. Sometimes it's all project driven, and that's what you're worried about. And, at Rundeck, we kind of help people on both. And, we can help you sort of wherever you are in your journey.
Brilliant. Thank you. Really appreciate the time, Damon. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
Take care.